all of the anniversary details are out, and we know that Hoshimi Korai is confirmed to be released on the 22nd of July. Now, if you want to find out more info about the other events that are happening during anniversary celebration, then do check out my last video. I'll have included all of the details there. But today's video is going to be focusing on SP Hoshimi Korai, who is probably the most highly anticipated character in this game, and also, in my opinion, the strongest character in this game as well. Now, normally I try to do a bit of a video talking about should we summon on a brand new character. This one is better no-brainer, okay? Everyone should just be going for him, okay? So I'm not going to talk about that. But instead, I will be still going through his skill just to show you guys exactly why he's so good and what makes him a must-summon character. Now, before even going on to the skill, just take a look at all of the label or the traits that he's able to do, and then you will realize that Hoshimi Korai is the only character in this game right now who actually have every single label. So that basically means he's going to be extremely versatile, no matter which specialty you will be playing him in, he is able to perform a very, very good role in that. And that is what makes him so universal. And obviously, he is also just very, very good character in general as well. Now, let's take a look at his skills one by one. His skill 1, he is able to buff your characters with block skills by a tiny amount of block, power attack, and also quick attack stat. The buff itself is not that much, and to be honest, Hoshimi Korai is mainly for like a spiker or blocker or receiver, etc. He's not really a supporting character, so this is just better than nothing, but don't expect too much of a buff out of this one. This is obviously able to improve all of the character with the block skills, and Hoshimi Korai does also have a block skill himself, so I guess indirectly this would also be applied to himself, and therefore also buffing up his own block and also his spiking power. Now, moving on to his skill 2, it's very similar to the UR version where we get one skill which performs basically 3 different roles. So first of all, there's the jump serve. You are able to increase your power attack and also quick attack stats by 1,000 points for that turn where you are serving. So that's very nice. Once again, tiny bit above. 1,000 points is not that much, to be honest, because vast majority of the time, if you actually build Hoshimi Korai and also from the rest of his kit, he's already able to really buff up his own stats already. So this 1,000 points is probably only going to be somewhere between like 5 to 10% buff effectively on himself. Okay, so just a nice tiny bit of buff, but don't think too much about it. Now, on the receive and block, however, it's slightly different. What's going to happen is that when he does a receive, provided your line of specialty is actually block or quick attack, you will actually be increasing your block stats by 3,000 points, and vice versa for block. If you actually perform a block and your line of specialty is power attack or receive, you'll be increasing your receive by 3,000 points. Now, 3,000 points on this one is actually going to be pretty massive, purely because Hoshimi, even though he does actually have pretty strong power spiking stats, his block and also receive are going to be slightly lower because those are kind of more the secondary actions, I guess, in some sense. So 3,000 here is going to obviously mean a lot more than 3,000 in a very already high power attack stat. Not to mention, this is actually 3,000 rather than 1,000 as well. So obviously, the buff you're actually able to get is already going to be very, very strong here. Now, the other interesting thing, and maybe we will actually need to test to see exactly how this works, but it's almost that if you actually want to build him as, have him perform as a blocker, you actually need him to perform a receive first in order to buff it up, and vice versa. If you actually want to have your Hoshimi Korai do very, very well at receiving, you actually need to have him starting off actually performing block as well. So depending on the lineup rotation, there may be a slight restriction. Well, no restriction, but it would certainly help a lot more if you actually place or starting off Hoshimi Korai in a role which is not supposed to be the right role that he should be in, and therefore he then rotates on the role that he actually wants to be in. Okay, but like I said, let's do a bit of a testing video once he is actually out, just to confirm that, and then I will do an actual guide on kind of like the rotation, positioning, and also just build guide in general for SP Korai. Now, for his skill 3, whenever your players use skills which are the same type as your line of specialty, you're going to get the stack called well-roundedness. If Hoshimi Korai uses his own specialty, use an ultimate which match that specialty, you can get 1 extra stack as well. Now, one thing to bear in mind here is that if your Hoshimi Korai is not as skilled than 4, then the only ultimate he would have is basically his spiking ability. So this essentially would only be activated if you have a power specialty or quick specialty. However, if you do actually get him to skill Resonance 4, then his skill 2 can actually be treated as an ultimate, and then all of a sudden this can now be applied to block and receive as well. Okay, but otherwise this will only be applied to power and quick as skill Resonance 3 or lower. Now, what does this stack actually do? First of all, it gives you a tiny bit of basic stat, but then the other thing is that whenever you use your skills, you would also be able to increase your awareness and reflex by 20% for each of the stats. So what this basically means is that Hoshimi Korai can pretty much guarantee crit every single time, because provided even if only one person on your team have touched the ball, which is the same as your specialty, then what's basically going to happen is that you can already get 2 stacks, so that's be 40 here, plus the base 40, that's already 80%, okay? And then from the second rally onwards, it's pretty much guaranteed that Hoshimi Korai will go over more than 100% on both awareness and reflex. And that's also going to be helpful, because when it actually exceeds that 100% threshold, your strength will increase by 50% and your spirit would also increase by 70% as well. Okay, so this is all very, very nice. Now, when your lineup specialty is block or quick attack, what's going to happen is that Hoshimi Korai's block power increase by 200, and vice versa. If your specialty is power attack or receive, then your receive power increase by 200. And what that basically means is that the skill multiplier for your skill 2, even though they are not ultimate, it will be essentially having similar multipliers as an ultimate, because you have the 140 base plus an extra 200 here, and all of a sudden that becomes 340, which is definitely in line with the ultimate have for other characters. Okay, and so basically this just makes his his skill 2 essentially have the same multiplier as an ultimate attack, even though it's still technically not called an ultimate yet. Now onto his skill 4. So once again, it's going to be slightly different ability depending on your specialty. If it's block or quick attack, what's going to happen is that you'll be buffing up your own power attack stats based on your quick attack stats. Is going to be capped to only 60%, however, and also your ultimate attack is now going to be treated as a quick spiking ultimate as well. So obviously this for himself would mean, for example, when you actually touch the ball, use your quick spike, you can get 1 extra stack of well-roundedness. It could also mean that for certain setters such as Kageyama, who only buff up quick attacking stats, that can now actually be also utilized on Hoshimi Korai as well, because it's now also treated as a quick spike. Now, if it's the other way around, if your specialty is power attack or receive, then what's going to happen is that the power multiplier is now going to increase by 100%. So it's going to be 50% for sure, and then another additional 50% when you crit. But like I said, Hoshimi Korai should be more or less always critting already. So I'm just going to say 100%, and that will bump up your skill multiplier from 275 to 375. Okay, so both of them are going to be very nice. It's just going to be slightly different type of buff depending on your specialty. Now, moving on to his resonance. Skill resonance 2, when you use a skill, your skill power will be further increasing. There's a cap of 150, and also when you use your own ultimate, you will also be increasing. Now, this is something we need to test, because I'm not too sure whether the cap are the same cap or are they different. So, for example, if I actually do 2 ultimate attack, would that be 200? Well, would those actually be the same type of capping, and therefore cap out only 150? Those are things we need to check. But anyway, if you do not have your Hoshimi Korai as skill resonance 4, what's going to happen is that your ultimate is only going to have 8 net crossing cooldown, and also your skill 2 have 8 net crossing cooldown. So it's unlikely that you be actually able to use this multiple times in the same rally, and the buff only lasts for 1 rally anyway. So even though this is going to be capped at 150, vast majority of the time I'm going to guess you can probably only get it once or maybe 2 stacks at most as skill resonance 2 only. Okay, so don't think of this 150 as it's very, very high. It's probably more likely to be only 50 or 100, depending on how long that rally is. Now, when you line up specialty counter the opponent, your power attack will further increase as well. Now, this is actually very, very easy to trigger, especially if you're actually attacking, because regardless whether club contest or PvP, you normally want to counter your enemy specialty anyway, just because it will give you a much bigger buff for your whole team. So this is pretty natural thing to do already, and obviously Hoshimi Korai can further take advantage of that. Now, when you're actually defending, this is going to be completely useless, because no one's going to be stupid enough to attack into a specialty which is stronger than theirs. They would just simply change out their specialty before attacking you. So this is pretty much only going to be valid when you're attacking. Okay. Now moving on to his skill resonance 4. So when he uses his versatile attacks, which is basically his skill 2, what's going to happen is that he is always going to crit. This to me is a bit of a no point because he is more or less always able to crit anyway whenever he do any touches. So that is pretty useless. However, then the second part is what makes it really, really useful, which is that now this is going to be treated as an ultimate. And also, for completeness, there's also going to be one last sentence, which is that when he uses ultimate, strength and spirit are going to further increase. Now, why is his skill 2 considered as ultimate very, very important? There are two reasons why it's going to be very, very important. Number one, a lot of his own attacks relying on usage of ultimate. So for example here, when you use an ultimate matching on your specialty, you can get one extra set. Like I said earlier, unless you actually have him as skill level 4, otherwise this would never be triggered if you are actually playing a block or receive specialty. So that's already very important. And then the second thing is obviously also going to help towards his own skill level too, because like I said earlier, unless you actually have him as skill resonance 4, otherwise your cooldown is going to be a cooldown net crossing of 8, and therefore you will only be able to trigger this once or twice. Now you might be thinking, why would this suddenly change? Why would the cooldown suddenly change just because I have him as an ultimate? Well, the reason is for the next character coming up, Hirugami, if you actually take a look at his skill 1, what's going to say if that player's block ultimate cooldown duration is at least 8 net crossing, then all of their ultimate cooldown will actually reduce by 4. And there's going to be an amazing combo or synergy with Hoshimi Korai, because if you actually have Korai as skill resonance 4, his ultimate is now going to be considered a block ultimate. It has a net crossing of 8, and what's going to happen is that all of Hoshimi Kurai's ultimate cooldown will reduce by 4, and that basically means he can now block every other turn, as well as spike every other turn. And that then all of a sudden makes it, first of all, very, very strong, because you can actually now almost spam your skills. But then the second thing is you can actually now take advantage of his skill resonance too, because now all of a sudden it's actually going to be a lot easier for you to stack it up all the way to 150. Before, it would have taken you 20 or 16 net crossings. Now you will only take you 8 net crossing, okay, in literally half the amount of speed that you are able to actually cap and fully stack this. So that's kind of what skill resonance 4 is going to be a massive upgrade to Hoshimi Korai. But that's only with the condition that you're actually going to play him with Hirugami. If you don't actually play him with Hirugami, then fine, you just have him unnamed, that all of his skills are now being called an ultimate, but it doesn't really have any actual benefit of being an ultimate, okay? So this skill resonance 4 is only really going to be valuable when you actually play him with Hirugami. So let's wrap up this video now. I think it's obvious Hoshimi Korai is going to be a must-summon character. It's the only question is going to be how many times you summon him, because whether or not you actually want to dupe him up. For me, skill resonance 2 is not, I mean, it's still good, but I feel like skill resonance 2 only really shines once you actually get him to skill resonance 4, so that you can actually cap it to 150. So if you only have Hoshimi Korai and decide to get him to skill resonance 2, I think that's pretty much just preparing yourself to get him to eventually skill resonance 4 in the future. I wouldn't suggest anyone to go for skill resonance 2 and just simply stop at skill resonance 2, okay? If you only have enough resources to go to skill resonance 2 for the time being, that's absolutely fine, but you need to have a plan to eventually get him to skill resonance 4, okay? Now, having said that, obviously going to skill resonance 4 is going to cost you a lot of resources, and also I kind of mentioned that skill resonance 4 is only really going to be impactful when you actually have him with Hirugami, who skill 1 is now actually able to take advantage of the fact that Hoshimi Korai has a block ultimate in order to reduce the cooldown, etc. So what that also suggests to you guys is that even though skill resonance 4 on Hoshimi Korai is going to be very important, it should not come at an expense of them not able to summon to even get just one copy of Hirugami. Okay, so depending on how much resources you guys have, obviously the best strategy you guys can do is guarantee that you are actually able to get at least one copy of both Hoshimi Korai and also Hirugami first, and then work backwards to say, you know, how much resource do you actually need in order to guarantee one copy on each of the characters, and then if you need to dump extra resources, you can then go and dump them into Hoshimi Korai's banner. Even if you're not able to go to skill resonance 4 straight away, that can be part of your long-term plan, especially now that with chain packs and all of this events as well, it's actually going to be relatively easy for you to eventually get a character to skill resonance 4. So you should definitely have that aim, but the number one priority is definitely going to make sure sure you have enough resources to at least get one copy of each of the camel duel first.